told to be on a FODMAPs diet, but you're a little bit confused? Hello, my successful and healthy earthlings. Mihaela Ragushia, naturopath and founder of the Natural Health podcast. Today, I'm going to share with you a little bit more about FODMAPs diet, the ins and outs. And at the end of this episode, I'm also going to give you an opportunity to join our health and success-oriented community by joining the health newsletter by clicking the link below. Welcome to the Natural Health podcast, where we bring awareness to sustainable health in the business hustle space. Natural Health podcast is perfect for the high-performing, business-minded individuals who want to work with their biochemistry to achieve success and optimal health. It's Wednesday, which means it's time for What Would I Do? In today's episode of Natural Health podcast, we discuss this week's question. All questions are kept confidential, and I read them and answer them as if it was me, hence why it's called What Would I Do? The information provided is not to be taken as advice and is solely for information purposes only. I'm not here to cure, treat, or provide medical advice. I'm here to educate you and inform you so you're able to take steps towards optimal health. Please discuss any medical or lifestyle changes or issues with your healthcare professional. Now that's out of the way, let's get into today's question. The question today is, I have been told to go on a FODMAPs diet with no end date. I am very confused. Is it okay to be on FODMAPs diet long term? How long should I be on this diet? Thank you so much for writing in. What an absolutely great question. Before we got into what I would do, let's look at FODMAPs. FODMAPs are a group of sugars that are not completely digested or absorbed in the intestines. When FODMAPs reach the small intestine, they move slowly, attracting water. When they pass into the large intestine, FODMAPs are fermented by gut bacteria, and this is where gas is produced. And this may be an issue for a lot of individuals who have IBS, causing them pain and discomfort. Essentially, this FODMAPs diet was intended for people who've been medically diagnosed with IBS. So you may be or have been diagnosed with IBS. So sometimes if a medical doctor has not diagnosed your gastrointestinal symptoms, you should not be following this diet. That's kind of what they're saying, but it's essentially IBS is important. This is a treatment for IBS such as celiac disease, inflammatory bowel disease, endometriosis, and bowel cancers. So this is what's similar to IBS. So researchers at Monash University did an original research to come up with the concept of FODMAPs and established the low FODMAP diet here in Melbourne. Monash research showed IBS symptoms improve in 3 out of 4 people who follow a low FODMAP diet. Other research groups from all around the world have since shown similar results, which is absolutely amazing that something like that came here from Melbourne, Australia. Good on you, Monash University. The benefits are usually seen within 2 to 6 weeks following the diet. So what are FODMAPs? What foods are in there? So let's just look into it. FODMAPs, the reason why it's called FODMAPs is F for fermentables, O for oligosaccharides, D for disaccharides, M for monosaccharides, and polos, which is also in there. So the question that I have for you is, who told you to go on the FODMAPs diet? When did they tell you to go on a FODMAP diet? Why did they tell you to go on a FODMAP diet? This is absolutely essential to understand. So let's look at foods that are high in FODMAPs. From vegetables, we look at artichokes, asparagus, cauliflower, garlic, green peas, leek, mushrooms, onion. Fruits are apples, cherries, dried fruit, mango, nectarines, peaches, pears, plums, watermelon. Dairy and alternatives is cow milk, custard, evaporated milk, ice cream, soy made from whole soybeans, sweetened condensed milk, yogurt. Protein sources is most legumes, pulses, some marinated meats, poultry, seafood, some processed meats. And then look at breads and wheat, rye, barley, breakfast cereals, biscuits and snack products. Sugars is high fructose corn syrup, honey, sugar-free confectionery. Nuts and seeds is cashews and pistachios. So you can find all this information at Monash FODMAP.com, and he also goes into some low FODMAP alternatives. So this is really interesting for you to have a look at so you actually understand a FODMAPs diet. Okay, but let's look at some questions that you can ask yourself first. Is, who was the individual that placed you on a FODMAPs diet? What were they instructions for you to go on a FODMAP diet? What were the instructions that were given to you? How long you should stay on it for? I know you said there was not an end date. It's to understand why they told you to go on it. What was the reasoning behind it? Okay, why did they tell you to go on a FODMAPs diet? How long have you been doing the FODMAPs diet? How long have you actually been doing it for? When you were on it, did you get any result? Did you do it for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Were there any results that you saw on there? Did your, if you had cramping, did it reduce? If you had bloating, did that reduce? Do you currently have any underlying conditions? Underlying conditions such as mental disorders? Do you have any thyroid disorders, heart disorders, blood sugar regulations, anything along those lines? Are you on any medications at the moment or any supplements at the moment? When did the issue start that you went and saw the practitioner for that put you on a FODMAPs diet? Whatever that was. I'm guessing IBS. When did that start and what occurred around that time, and what triggers your IBS? What food triggers and what environment triggers your IBS? When did the symptoms start? Have you done any gut healing protocols? Have you done any tests on your gut? What is your gut health like at the moment? Do you have any history of restricting food, such as bulimia, anorexia, or any food eating disorders? Because this may be impacting you restricting food. This is important to look into. Do you have any other issues around food? What is your relationship with food like? All of these questions are so important to ask. What would I do? Okay. The first thing that I would do is I would talk to the individual who prescribed me the FODMAP diet. I would ask them why they put me on a FODMAP diet, how long I need to be on it, and keep in touch with them on a weekly, fortnightly basis. Ensure I do a food diary, ensure that they can access my food diary and give me feedback on that. I would ask for a plan. What is the plan? After I finish this FODMAP, what is the plan for it? Because with FODMAP, you have to go into a reintroduction stage. And this reintroduction stage is important and key for you to keep touch base with the practitioner. Okay. Not staying on it long term, because you need variety. Okay, so many FODMAP foods actually contain prebiotics, and severely restricting your intake of prebiotics can influence your health and glut for the long end. So this is what's important for what I would do is I would get my microbiome tested and figure out what's my current status of my bacteria in my body, the good and the bad. What's my gut currently have and what does it need more of? I need to understand my current gut status, what's happening. And then after I do the FODMAPs, maybe even get it tested again and see if it helps out, right? But your question about being on it for long term. So there's a study at King's College London that measured long-term effectiveness of FODMAP diet. So what they said is, given the adverse changes in gut microbopulation associated with long-term adherence to a lot FODMAP diet, they always encourage people to enter a re-challenge phase and, under the guidance of a dietitian, find an acceptable balance between the occasional inclusion of moderate and high FODMAPs foods and adequate symptom control. In the long term, they advocate people follow the least restrictive diet necessary. Further research into the re-challenge and long-term maintenance phase is needed. But essentially they're saying is you don't want to stay in it for long term, and you want to make sure that you're working with a healthcare professional so you can reintegrate these foods that have caused you symptoms in a healthy way. But the key is I would get my gut checked and get a gut protocol and get gut healing happening ASAP. So there you have it. I hope that I shed some light to your question. Anyone who may be listening who has questions about FODMAPs, if you have any other questions, feel free to contact me at mahela.raguz on Instagram, and I'll hopefully be able to answer your question on the Natural Health Podcast. Do what you do best. Love, like, share the Natural Health Podcast. Here, support us. Share this episode that can help out anyone that you believe may assist from this episode. And if you want to be on top of the latest research, have the best products being sent to your inbox, have specials and bonuses of resources sent in the inbox weekly, join the Natural Health newsletter by clicking the link below. And remember, the missing link between failure and success is your health. Content and information provided here is the opinion of Mahela Raguz and is for information purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. It is not intended to provide medical advice or take the place of medical advice or any current treatment you're undertaking. Consult your own medical professionals for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the Natural Health Podcast. It is advised that you consult your doctor or healthcare professional in relation to any health concerns you may be having. Mahela Raguz does not take responsibility for any health consequences which occur from a person listening, viewing, or reading this content. And in no circumstances shall the Natural Podcast, Mahela Raguz, any guests or contributors to the Natural Podcast, or any employees, associates, or affiliates of Mahela Raguz be responsible for damages arising from the information provided on the Natural Podcast. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical conditions in either yourself or others. Please note, if you're taking prescription, do not stop your medication or start a new protocol, including but not limited to supplements, diet, lifestyle changes without consulting a doctor or healthcare professional. If you or any person has a medical concern, you should consult with your healthcare provider or seek other professional medical advice. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something that you have read or heard on the Naturopath podcast or in any linked materials. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. Neither Mihaela Raguse nor the publisher of this content takes responsibility for the possible health consequences of any person or persons reading or listening or following the information in educational content.